So next to the stage, I'd like to welcome Dr. Jennifer Barth, Jen, who's research director at Symmetry, and she leads on independent research projects that intersection between emerging technologies and socioeconomic change. So she is going to come up here to wrap up this particular section. Welcome, Jen.
Thanks, Alexan, and thanks for being my travel partner here and back. I think she's already introduced me. So I am also the Chief Research Officer at Open UK, and we've been leading on the State of Open in the UK reports on open source software for the last number of years, and the one that another speaker suggested would be coming up, which would be our sustainability one in November. But today I'm going to talk to you about making that change that Jan so very brilliantly just set me up for, which is great. And that is the transition to greener digital futures. Now, I'm not going to get technical here because that's not my area of expertise, but I'm going to talk about how we might think about making the change we need to make. So I'll go through transitions and transformations, the global energy transition, so a broader conversation about what's happening with energy, the digital transition opportunity that we've heard many times now today, and a little bit about making that change using Rust. So I want to start with something a bit theoretical. Transformation means change in shape and highlights what it is that changes from emergent patterns of change and what are outcomes at a systemic level to identify emerging social, ecological vulnerabilities, maladaptations, and tipping points in domains like climate change. Transition having a core meaning of going across. Transition focuses on the processes and dynamics producing patterns of change to explain how the nonlinear shift from one state to another is supported or hindered. So, for example, the gradual shift we are talking about from take, make, and waste to a circular and sustainable digital economy and designing waste out of the system. So it's a distinction between those small steps in transition and the way in which we can look at the things we're in control of and contributing to a broader transformation, which is what we all want to see. Now, I'm going to digress slightly to something that's very close to my heart, and that's coffee transitions. So my PhD at Oxford was on, I'm actually a geographer by trade, and my PhD was on coffee. And we looked at the ethics of coffee in Guatemala and producing coffee, which is a massive, like the digital economy, it's often the first and often the second biggest economic contributor to the world. It is massively embedded in systems that are problematic and often corrupt and often focused not on the thing we're doing, like coffee farmers and people and making something and the earth, but rather on the money that's changing hands. And someone once told me, don't ever think about coffee as coffee and brown, always think of it as green, like money. But actually, when I did my research in Guatemala, I found loads of different transitions that were happening, and that's because the narrative of transition was there. The possibility was there to think about small ways that coffee farmers could make differences. So the fact now that this city is full of small coffee shops that bring you ethically sourced coffee is because of all these small transitions. Being on a coffee farm and seeing someone doing incredible things with water use and recycling their water. People who you think could never afford to do it were using their ideas, their innovation, and as was talked about earlier today, just ways of thinking about things differently. And those small changes are having a very big impact, not just on the coffee economy as a whole, but on people's lives, where young people who never thought they would go to university, young people who never thought that they could be an active participant in an economy that's based on not being active, but being a passive addition, now can make change. So I just wanted to use that example because it's a very beautiful, very particular story about the way people can enact that change and make very technical systems better for the environment. This is from a BP Outlook report a couple years ago, and that's that not all energy transitions are equal. And as was recently said, The global challenge is that we still need more energy, but we need to produce less carbon, and we need to emit less. And what's interesting about this graph is actually the top line, and I can't quite see what the top line is. The top line is, new momentum, so where we need to go. The middle one is accelerated, and that accelerated because of the Ukraine war, because of the changes made in the energy mix from non-renewable to renewable. So we see an acceleration in a situation, and actually this happened as well back in the OPEC crisis in the 70s. So it's a really interesting, and to actually reach net zero, you can see where that line is. So things that happen in the world, political situations, make very, very big differences to the way we think about our energy. And there is a lockstep relationship between human development and energy consumption. So Human Development Index is based on healthy living, level of education and knowledge production, and reaching a minimum standard of living. And you can see how much of the population lives below the index, and that's 80% of the population. So the ones across this line at 100 are the more developed countries, and that's where we have to be reducing. But on the other hand, we need more energy to help others move up. So a very small amount, like 0.5 per capita energy production, can move people out of this lowest into a middle region, making a huge difference to a huge population in the world. We need more energy overall, and we need to reduce and give back energy from countries that have too much. You see this in what happened in 2020 with COVID. So there was a dip in energy consumption. We all know that. We felt like the world had become cleaner, we could all breathe, energy changed. You know, one positive or seemingly useful fact that was coming out of COVID and the slowing down of people producing all of the time meant we dipped in energy. It also meant that the Global Human Development Index dipped for the first time. Very few things have ever made it dip to that extent, and life expectancy has actually reduced in the US and the UK. So there's a very clear relationship between these things. So the people, the politics, the situation on the ground are all connected to how we have to talk about and think about this problem. And of course, existing commitments for 2030 would decrease greenhouse gas emissions by 7.5%, but we need a 55% reduction by 2030 to stay on track to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. As has already been said, we are far behind. So what actually is actionable for people? You can see the dance that's happening globally. You can see the oil prices and the relationship to the effects of the climate crisis right now. Hurricanes, floods, droughts, wildfires are driving higher and higher coal and gas prices, and we're not doing enough to move to renewable sources yet. There's strangleholds in the system, but we need to do more. So the transformation we need to that renewable space, to that more energy, less carbon space, can't be triggered without these small transitions. And of course, the digital transition opportunity. Everything is digitized now. So the role for digital and ecosystem of things that can be influenced to make a difference has become greater. So the time is now to realize how important that is. And of course, if open source software is running most of that, then we see the potential through open source software development and change and greening. There's an increased recognition that there are significant gains through ICT because it has so long been neglected. We have focused on factories. We have focused on industrial change. So bringing digital technologies to scale, and this is from Digital for Climate Scenarios from the World Economic Forum, was doing fantastic work on energy transition. Bringing digital technologies to scale will reduce emissions by 20% by 2050. Every sector needs rewiring around efficiency, circularity, and sustainability. That is the opportunity in front of us. So of course, the arrow going through this, I don't know how well you can see that, is digital. Is the digital. So it's digitizing those transitions. It's showing that everything that goes on, market reform, net zero integrated energy systems, end use electrification, everything is powered by digital. I know we know this, but when you put it into perspective and you realize, how integral it is, both to how we change our energy efficiency and then how we do everything else. Every sector needs this change. This is the role of digital as the driver of that change. So, not all digital transitions are equal. So what we have to do now is twin digital and all we do and sustainability transition. So the how is building of your digital systems, and the what is sustainability. The potential sustainability effects of digital innovations for optimizing current production and consumption patterns, some of which are inherently unsustainable, do not necessarily drive sustainability transitions, i.e. reconfiguration of the structure of the socio-technical systems towards sustainability. It is a twinning of thinking sustainably and digitally. I just really like this quote. I don't know how many of you seen Atlas of AI by Kate Crawford, and I'm not going to speak a lot about AI, but what I love, and this just speaks to me as a geographer, I think, mostly, it's embodied. So artificial intelligence is both embodied and material, made from natural resources, fuel, human labor, infrastructures, logistics, histories, and classifications. They're not autonomous, rational, or able to discern anything without extensive, computationally intensive training with large data sets and predefined rules and rewards. So artificial intelligence, as we know it, is a vast set of supply chains that wrap around the entire planet. So we struggle with scope 3, we struggle with transparency across all of this, across every sector, across digital itself, and across everything that goes into making up our world. And why do we struggle with it? Because it's complicated. Because it's about people talking to people about where they're getting their things, and when they know where they're getting their things, sharing that information so that we all can do better together. But that's difficult because we have competitive requirements, of course. We need to make money, we need to live, we need to produce and make our businesses grow. But if we see ourselves as always interconnected, and we see the digital as always interconnected to all these pieces, including the earth, including sustainability, and even if you want to widen out of sustainability, the way in which poverty and people are impacted. So it's an interesting example of the lithium in the volcano, because my thought was, and can we have better labor laws? Because of course, we know how lithium is taken from the ground in many, many countries. Work I've done in gold mines and diamond mines, we've seen the same. Informal mining leads to all kinds of problematic situations. And every single thing is an energy output of a person connected to the digital world that moves our stuff. And example, of course, crypto, Bitcoin alone consumes over 0.5% of global energy, or more than Sweden or Belgium. Every transaction on Ethereum uses the same energy as a day and a half in a regular household. But 75% of crypto is mined in China, and 40% is coal in the mining energy mix. So getting to Rust, which is what I was supposed to originally talk about, is an example of something that twins digital transition and sustainability transition. Similar to what we were talking about earlier with the green software organization and on all the work you've been doing, refactoring, recoding, substituting sustainable anything for an unsustainable, and knowing it's sustainable when you do it, right? Understanding its energy efficiency. I know everybody's seen this. This was referred to before. So 10 benchmark problems in 27 different programming languages measure execution time, energy consumption, and peak memory use. C and Rust outperformed other languages in energy efficiency. And that's obviously a very big number, 98% more efficient than Python. But knowing it has that efficiency and saying this is why we're doing this is part of how you can begin to learn about doing this differently. You need to be aware that this is the change you're making. And that's what research like this can often do, and why this study now from, I think, 2017 is so highly quoted. And as Stu Harris at Red Badger, who very helpfully helped me learn a bit about the technical side of this, obviously Rust's ability to deal with bugs at the compile stage rather than runtime. Its ability, and I think a big part of what we're talking about, is to take waste out of the system, right? Every time we can take waste out of the system, we lower emissions, and we speed up the process, and we make it more efficient. So those things, and I'm going to point to Stu that he's speaking in a panel at 2:15, and he can speak about the technical aspects of Rust far better than I can. But it's been an amazing journey to understand what that means. So recoding or coding with Rust, for example, can change your whole relationship, and it twins from the outset sustainability and the digital. I don't know how long I've been speaking, but I'm going to end on this slide. So a couple of years ago, my organization did a research report with Microsoft, and we looked at the UK leaders' top 5 sustainability challenges. And we came up with ability to action sustainability strategy. So having a clear organizational strategy on sustainability was at 43%. The other piece I always learn, and have learned since I did an early project with Microsoft on creating a culture of digital transformation. And that was, you can't get anywhere unless your digital transformation plan is embedded in your business strategy. So it's part of what you're doing. We are not anymore a silo with digital running beside everything we're doing. It is deeply embedded. And now the argument is, so is sustainability. And that's what people are struggling with as organizations right now, because we still have sustainability as a separate piece to how we're thinking about our business strategies. So you need business strategy that understands digital, and inside of that digital is how you understand sustainability. Or in sustainability is how you understand how digital plays in, depending on where your business is at, or what you're making. Guidance is the second one, and only 41% feel they have clear government guidance for action. Very problematic, and we know that people are learning about net zero, learning about the ESG and how to meet it, learning about scope 3, but it's a difficult trajectory. Skills, we talked about, digital skills, it comes over and over, but skills, digital and sustainable skills, right? What does it mean to do both? Those are the things we're looking for, but in this, skills, having in-house skills and expertise on sustainability was only at 40%. So again, how do you make everyone know about this? Funding, having access to funding to implement your sustainability plan, 36%. And getting the most out of technology was only at 33%. And that was 2 years ago. So I've made a bit of an argument about what this would actually mean if we were to do this right now, and you thought about things like green coding, and you thought about things like where your sustainability sits. So strategic transition, twin sustainability transitions with digital transitions. Thinking about driving utilization rates of hardware up to maximum resources, thinking about everywhere that you're using energy and how digital runs through and uses that energy or creates opportunities for lowering emissions. Policy transition, how to factor energy efficient program languages into the net zero ESG guidance. So that really isn't there at this point. It's early conversations other people have pointed to. Skills transition, training a new generation of green coders. You know, we know we're missing skills. We know that there's big leaps that need to be made. So, and for example, the training that was spoken about earlier gives you that chance to learn, that work to efficiency and purpose and designing waste out. So these are the assumptions that start at the beginning of your coding journey. Funding transition, support making the business case for energy efficiency, and then scale. Funding also can come from places like your R&D, your ability to reach out and make collaborations around research, and to find ways to change the way you're thinking, because that's often the stage you're at. Tech transition, design waste out of the system, monitor and measure energy use, cloud and scaling services, all talked about today. Reuse and redistribute, which of course open source software is, you know, that core value and thinking around it. And energy sources fueling data centers, as we talked about earlier, so that you make the transition possible, because it's only with each of these transitions in each of these areas that we can truly transform or truly reach the goal we're talking about with sustainability. Thank you.